The first warning sign should have been the hushed voices coming from our home office. My husband Daniel never whispers. He's the kind of man who laughs too loud at parties and talks during movies. But that Tuesday evening, his voice was barely audible through the crack under the door. I'm Camilla. And until that moment, I thought I had the kind of marriage people envied. 15 years of building a life together, creating our dream home, and working towards early retirement. The kind of stable partnership where you finish each other's sentences and know exactly how the other takes their coffee. I stood outside that door longer than I should have, my hand frozen inches from the handle. Robert's voice, my brother-in-law's, carried through more clearly. You can't tell her everything. Just get her to sign the papers. My stomach dropped. I'd always been the one handling our finances. It was my forte, after all. I'm a financial advisor by profession, and Daniel had always joked that marrying me was the smartest investment he'd ever made. I knocked before I could hear Daniel's response, pushing the door open with a smile I hoped looked natural. Hey guys, I didn't know you were coming over, Robert. The guilty jump in both their postures was impossible to miss. Robert recovered first, flashing that trademark smile that had charmed his way out of trouble since childhood. Just dropped by to catch up with my favorite brother. Your only brother, I corrected, trying to keep my tone light as I noticed Daniel shoving papers into his desk drawer. Honey, I thought you were at yoga until 7, Daniel said, his voice slightly higher than usual. Class got canceled. I moved to kiss his cheek, catching a whiff of the whiskey they'd been sharing. Daniel never drank this early unless something was wrong. Everything okay? Perfect. Robert stood up too quickly, nearly knocking over his glass. Just perfect. But I should get going. Promised Carol I'd be home for dinner. Carol? I raised an eyebrow. Didn't she leave you 3 months ago? Robert's smile faltered for just a second. Right. I meant, I have a date. New girl. You don't know her. After Robert left, Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. He busied himself straightening papers on his desk, though I noticed his hands trembling slightly. Daniel? I said softly. What's going on? Nothing's going on. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just brother stuff. Brother stuff that requires whiskey at 4 in the afternoon? He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. He's going through some things. Family things. Nothing for you to worry about. I'm family, I reminded him. Of course you are. He finally looked at me, and something in his expression made my chest tight. Actually, there is something I need to talk to you about. Not now, but soon. Some papers I need you to sign. What kind of papers? Just family stuff. To help Robert out of a tight spot. He reached for my hand, squeezing it. Trust me? I squeezed back, even as alarm bells rang in my head. Always. That night, I lay awake listening to Daniel's steady breathing beside me. My mind kept returning to those whispered words. You can't tell her everything. In 15 years of marriage, Daniel had never kept secrets from me. We'd built our life on trust and transparency. I rolled over, studying his face in the dim light filtering through our curtains. He looked troubled, even in sleep. Whatever Robert had dragged him into, it was weighing on him heavily. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Robert. Thanks for understanding about today. Daniel's lucky to have such a trusting wife. Something about those words made my skin crawl. I deleted the message without responding and opened my banking app instead. Everything looked normal at first glance, but years of working with numbers had taught me that devils hide in details. I noticed a small transfer from our joint account to Daniel's personal account, $500, marked as golf equipment. Daniel hadn't played golf in years. Closing the app, I made a mental note to call my friend Lily tomorrow. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it would be her. Whatever was going on, whatever those papers were that Daniel wanted me to sign, I needed to be prepared. Because one thing was certain. The whispers I'd heard today were just the beginning of something much bigger, and I had a feeling our perfectly stable life was about to be shaken to its core. Alone? Are you sure that's what they were talking about? Lily stirred her latte, her forehead creased with concern. We were sitting in our usual corner of the local coffee shop, away from the morning rush. Not exactly, I admitted, but I know something's off. Daniel's been checking his phone constantly, and this morning he accidentally closed his laptop when I walked into the room. Lily leaned forward. Have you checked your accounts again? That's the thing. I pulled out my phone, opening the banking app. Look at these transactions from the past month. She squinted at the screen. Golf equipment, car repairs, business consulting fees? I thought Daniel worked in software sales. He does. I took my phone back, scrolling through more suspicious entries. And that car repair bill? We just had the car serviced 2 months ago. Could Robert be in some kind of trouble? Lily asked. Legal trouble? I shook my head. If it was legal, Daniel would tell me. We've always handled everything together. I paused, remembering something. But yesterday, I overheard Robert mentioning papers I needed to sign. Don't sign anything, Lily said sharply. Not until you know exactly what's going on. Back home, I waited until Daniel left for work before starting my investigation. His laptop was password protected, but I knew all his usual combinations. Our anniversary, his mother's birthday, our house number. None worked. That was new. We'd always known each other's passwords. I tried one more. Robert's birthday. The screen unlocked. My hands shook as I opened his email. There, in his inbox, were dozens of messages from Robert, dating back 3 months. I clicked on the most recent one. Dan, need another 5K by Friday. The guys aren't happy about last week. Don't tell Kay about this one either. Remember, it's just temporary until my investment pays off. Investment? Robert had never shown interest in legitimate investments. But gambling, that was different. The pieces started falling into place. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Daniel. Hey, honey, he said, sounding stressed. Listen, can you stop by the bank today? There are some papers they need you to sign. Just a formality for a family trust thing. My throat tightened. What kind of trust thing? It's complicated. Robert can explain better. He'll meet you there at 2. Daniel, I said carefully, is everything okay? You know you can tell me anything, right? A pause. Everything's fine. Just trust me on this, okay? After hanging up, I called the bank directly and spoke with our account manager, Sarah. Mrs. Clayton? Yes, we have the paperwork ready. It's for a secured loan against your joint assets. Your husband said you'd be coming by to co-sign. My blood ran cold. And what's the loan amount? $250,000. I gripped the edge of the desk, steadying myself. That was nearly all our savings, everything we'd worked for over 15 years. Sarah, please don't tell anyone I called. And I won't be coming in today after all. I spent the next hour documenting everything I'd found. The suspicious transfers, the emails, the loan paperwork. Then I called the one person I knew could help me make sense of it all. Maurice, it's Camilla. Remember that favor you owe me? I need your legal expertise. How quickly can you meet? Maurice, my old friend and corporate lawyer, agreed to see me immediately. As I gathered my evidence and grabbed my car keys, my phone buzzed with a text from Robert. See you at 2. Bring your ID and don't worry about reading all the boring legal stuff. It's just standard paperwork. I texted back. Sorry, something came up. Need to reschedule. 3 dots appeared as he typed his response. Dan says it's urgent. Family emergency. Family emergency. The same excuse they'd been using to drain our accounts for months. Well, they were right about one thing. This was definitely a family emergency, just not the kind they thought. As I drove to Maurice's office, my hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath the pain, something else was building. Determination. They thought I was just the trusting wife, ready to sign away our future without question. They were about to learn how wrong they were. My phone kept buzzing with messages from both Daniel and Robert, but I ignored them. Let them sweat. By the time I was done, they'd learned that the quiet, compliant woman they thought they knew had teeth, and she wasn't afraid to bite back. "These emails paint a pretty clear picture," Maurice said, spreading the printed documents across his desk. "Robert's got gambling debts, big ones, and Daniel's been helping him cover them with your money." I paced his office, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. But why wouldn't Daniel just tell me? We could have helped Robert get real help, found a way to— "Sit down, Camila," Maurice interrupted gently. "Look at this email thread from 6 weeks ago." I sank into the leather chair and read, "Dan, Kay's too straight-laced to understand. She'd probably make me go to therapy or some shit. These guys won't wait for that. Just need enough to cover what I owe, then I can win it all back. Got a sure thing coming up." The response from Daniel. "I hate lying to her. There has to be another way." Robert's reply. "There isn't, unless you want to explain to Mom why her firstborn is in the hospital. These aren't the kind of guys who send polite payment reminders. They're using threats to manipulate him," Maurice said, tapping the paper. "And Daniel's falling for it because he's always tried to protect his big brother," I finished. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel. 14 missed calls now. Maurice leaned back in his chair. "The real question is, what do you want to do about it?" I pulled out my notebook where I'd documented all the unauthorized transfers. "First, I want to know exactly how much they've taken." "Already ran those numbers." Maurice handed me a spreadsheet. "Just under 40,000 in the past 3 months. Jesus. I felt sick. "And now they want $250,000? Which would clean out most of your savings." He paused. "But we might be able to use this to our advantage." I looked up. "How?" "They're desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." Maurice pulled out a legal pad. "What if we gave them exactly what they want, but with our own twist?" For the next hour, we crafted a plan. By the time I left Maurice's office, my hands had stopped shaking. Now they were steady as I typed out a text to Daniel. "Sorry about earlier. Can we talk tonight? Just us?" His reply was immediate. "Of course. Home by 6. I spent the afternoon gathering more evidence. Bank statements, credit card bills, a recorded call to Robert's supposed investment advisor, whose number traced back to an offshore gambling site. At 5:45, I sat at our kitchen table, a glass of wine in hand, watching the sun set through our bay windows. The same windows we'd spent months saving for when we renovated. The home we'd built together, brick by brick, dream by dream. The front door opened at 6:02. "Camila?" Daniel's voice was tentative. "Honey?" "In the kitchen." He appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. The guilt in his eyes was plain as day now that I knew what to look for. "About today," he started. "I'm sorry if I seemed pushy about the bank. It's just— Sit down, Daniel." I pushed a glass of wine toward him. "We need to talk about Robert." He froze halfway to his chair. "What about Robert?" "About his gambling debts, about the 40,000 you've already given him from our accounts, about the loan he wants me to sign for that would wipe out our savings." The color drained from his face. "How did you— I'm a financial advisor, Daniel. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" He slumped into the chair. "They're going to hurt him, Camila. These guys he owes money to, they're serious." "So am I." I took a sip of wine. "Which is why I'm going to help." His head snapped up. "You are?" "On my terms." I pulled out the paperwork Maurice had prepared. "I'll sign for the loan, but with conditions. First, Robert agrees to addiction counseling. Real counseling, not some online program. Second, he signs over power of attorney to me for all his financial decisions." "He'll never agree to that." "Then he'll never see a penny of our money." I met Daniel's eyes. "And you'll never make another transfer without my knowledge. Those are my terms." Daniel stared at the papers, conflict written across his face. "He's my brother, Camila. And I'm your wife. The wife you've been lying to for months." I stood up, gathering the papers. "Think about it. Talk to Robert. But remember, this is the only offer you're getting." As I walked out of the kitchen, Daniel called after me. "Where are you going?" "To bed. I have an early meeting tomorrow." I paused at the stairs. Oh, and Daniel, I changed all the banking passwords, just in case you need time to think about your priorities. I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for them to walk into it. The next morning, I found Daniel at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, nursing a cold cup of coffee. His phone lay silent beside him, unusual for a workday morning. Not going to the office? I asked, starting the coffee maker. Called in sick. He looked up, dark circles under his eyes. I talked to Robert last night. And? He's... Daniel rubbed his face. He's willing to consider your terms. I poured fresh coffee for both of us. Consider isn't good enough. Camila, please. His voice cracked. You don't understand what he's going through. Then explain it to me. I sat down across from him. Help me understand why my husband has been stealing from our future to enable his brother's addiction. I haven't been stealing. $40,000, Daniel. Without my knowledge or consent. What would you call it? He flinched. They threatened to break his legs, said they'd come after his kids next. The kids he hasn't seen in 6 months because Carol got full custody? I took a sip of coffee. Did you ever verify these threats? Speak to these people yourself? Robert showed me the messages. Show me. What? Show me the threatening messages. I held out my hand. If Robert's life is in danger, we should go to the police. Daniel's face fell. He deleted them. Of course he did. I stood up, my coffee forgotten. Because they don't exist. He's playing you, Daniel. Just like he played you with the college fund Mom left you. Just like he played you with his startup company 5 years ago. That was different. Was it? I pulled out my phone. Because I called Carol yesterday. Daniel's head snapped up. Want to know what your brother's ex-wife told me? About how she found their mortgage payments weren't being made? How their kids' college funds disappeared? How she finally left when she discovered he'd taken out 3 credit cards in her name? He was going through a rough patch then. He's been going through a rough patch his entire adult life. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. And you've been cleaning up his messes, making excuses, enabling him. He's family. Daniel slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. What am I supposed to do, let him destroy himself? He's already destroying himself. You're just letting him destroy us, too. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, a lawnmower droned. Someone's dog barked. Normal sounds from a normal morning while my marriage crumbled over cold coffee. I love you, Daniel, I said softly, but I won't watch you throw away everything we've built. Not for Robert's lies. Not for anyone. His phone buzzed, Robert's face lighting up the screen. Daniel reached for it, but I was faster. Hello, Robert, I answered, putting it on speaker. Camila? He sounded surprised. Is Daniel there? Right here. Let's talk about those terms. A pause. Look, I appreciate the offer, but I don't need addiction counseling. I just need a little help getting out of a tight spot. $250,000 isn't a little help. It's temporary, he insisted. I've got a system now, foolproof. 2 weeks, tops, and I'll pay it all back with interest. I caught Daniel's eye. Hear that, honey? He's got a system. Daniel looked away. Robert, I said, here's what's going to happen. You'll meet us at Maurice Armstrong's office tomorrow at noon. You'll sign the papers giving me power of attorney, and you'll enroll in the treatment program we've chosen. Or you can explain to these supposed debt collectors why you can't pay them. You bitch, he snarled, mask finally slipping. You think you can control everyone with your money? Daniel, are you going to let her... I ended the call. He didn't mean that, Daniel said quietly. Yes, he did. I placed his phone back on the table. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you mean? Tomorrow at noon, I'm going to Maurice's office. With or without you. With or without Robert. I headed for the door, grabbing my purse. You need to decide whose side you're on, your brother's enabler or your wife's partner. That's not fair. Neither is lying to me for months. I paused at the door. I'll be at Lily's tonight. Text me when you've made your decision. As I drove away, my phone lit up with messages from Robert, alternating between threats and pleading. I blocked his number. The ball was in Daniel's court now. Tomorrow would show whether our marriage was worth more to him than his brother's manipulation. I just hoped I was ready for either answer. They're not coming, I said, checking my phone for the 100th time. Maurice's office clock showed 12:20. Give them a few more minutes. Maurice adjusted his tie, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Traffic might be... The door burst open. Daniel rushed in, followed by a disheveled Robert. Sorry we're late, Daniel mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Had to convince me not to tell you where to stick your paperwork. Robert finished, dropping into a chair. His usual charm was replaced by barely contained hostility. Maurice cleared his throat. Now that we're all here, let's review the agreement. First, Robert interrupted, I want to know what's in it for you, Camilla. Playing savior to the black sheep brother-in-law? That get you off? Robert, Daniel warned. No, let him talk, I said calmly. Better now than later. Maurice pulled out the documents. The terms are straightforward. Mrs. Clayton will secure a loan against her joint assets with Mr. Clayton, providing the requested sum of $250,000. Robert leaned forward. However, Maurice continued, the funds will be released in structured payments contingent upon Mr. Robert Clayton's attendance and participation in an approved addiction treatment program. Additionally, all financial decisions will be overseen by Mrs. Clayton through power of attorney. Absolutely not. Robert stood up. Daniel, this is ridiculous. Tell your wife to... Sit down, Daniel said quietly. Robert blinked. What? I said sit down. Daniel's voice was stronger now. You need help, Rob. Real help. I need money, not a babysitter. The money comes with conditions, I said. Non-negotiable ones. Robert paced the office like a caged animal. Those guys aren't going to wait for me to finish some therapy program. They want their money now. Then let's call them, I suggested, pulling out my phone. What's their number? You can't just... Why not? If these threats are real, let's get them on the line. Maybe we can negotiate directly. Robert's face reddened. It doesn't work like that. Because they don't exist? I pressed. Or because they're not as dangerous as you've led Daniel to believe? You don't know anything about... I know about Carol, I cut in. About the remortgaged house, the empty college funds, the credit card fraud. Robert lunged forward, but Daniel caught his arm. Don't, Daniel warned. Maurice's hand moved toward his desk phone. Should I call security? No need, I said, standing. Robert's going to sit down and sign these papers, because if he doesn't, his next call will be from the fraud department at 3 different credit card companies. I have copies of everything, Robert. Everything. The silence stretched thin as a wire. Robert looked at Daniel, but found no ally there. Fine, he spat. Where do I sign? Maurice walked him through the documents. Power of attorney, treatment program enrollment, structured payment schedule. Robert's hand shook as he signed each page. The first payment will be released after you complete 1 week of treatment, I explained. The program starts Monday. A week? Robert protested. I told you they won't... They'll wait, I said firmly. Because you're going to call them right now with us present and explain the situation. Or there's no deal. Robert's facade cracked. I can't. Because they don't exist, Daniel said softly. Do they, Rob? Robert's shoulders slumped. The admission hung unspoken in the air. After Robert left, Daniel stayed behind. I'm sorry, he said. For everything. I should have seen... Yes, you should have. I gathered my purse. But we're not done yet. What do you mean? Maurice handed me another set of documents. This is phase 2, I explained. But first, I need to know if you're with me. Really with me this time. Daniel took my hand. Whatever it takes to fix this. To fix us. Good. I squeezed his hand before letting go. Because Robert's not the only one who needs to sign some papers today. Maurice spread out the new documents, updated power of attorney forms, revised joint account agreements, new trust arrangements, everything we needed to ensure this could never happen again. Are you sure about this? Daniel asked, pen hovering over the first page. I'm sure about protecting our future, I replied. The question is, are you? Daniel signed. As we left Maurice's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Did they show? I typed back, Phase 1 complete, starting Phase 2 tomorrow. Because while Robert and Daniel thought today's signatures were the end of the story, I knew better. This was just the beginning of my real plan. The one that would teach them both exactly what happened when you underestimated a trusting wife. He's been in treatment for 3 days, Daniel said, pacing our living room. Shouldn't we release at least some funds? I looked up from my laptop. The agreement was 1 week, but he keeps calling, saying these guys are getting impatient. There are no guys, Daniel. We established that. My phone buzzed. A text from Maurice. Everything's ready. Green light whenever you're ready. Actually, I closed my laptop. You're right. Maybe we should release some funds early. Daniel stopped pacing. Really? On one condition, I want to meet these supposed debt collectors, face to face. I don't think. If Robert wants the money early, those are my terms. Set it up. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Robert. Fine, he said, skipping any greeting. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., the Paradise Lounge downtown. Perfect. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. And Robert? Bring everyone involved. I want to settle this once and for all. The Paradise Lounge was exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find gambling debts being settled. Dark corners, sticky floors, and enough noise to cover uncomfortable conversations. I arrived early, positioning myself at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Maurice sat at the bar, pretending to watch a game. Lily was stationed near the back exit. Everything was in place. At 8:05, Robert walked in with Daniel. No debt collectors in sight. Where are they? I asked as they sat down. On their way, Robert said quickly. They want to see the money first. I pulled out an envelope. $250,000 cashier's check. Robert's eyes locked onto it. His hands twitched. Funny thing about cashier's checks, I continued. The bank keeps detailed records, like when someone tries to cash them, or deposit them, or alter them. What are you talking about? Robert's voice wavered. I pulled out my phone, opened a recording app. Tell me about these debt collectors, Robert. Tell me exactly who they are, what they want, and why they're not here. They're coming. No, they're not. I leaned forward. Because they don't exist. Just like they didn't exist 6 years ago when you needed Daniel's college fund. Or 3 years ago with your startup company. Camilla, Daniel started, but I held up my hand. The truth, Robert. Now. Or I call Carol and tell her about the new credit card you opened in her name last month. Robert's face went white. How did you— Oh, I'm very good at my job. And you're very bad at covering your tracks. The facade crumbled. Robert slumped in his chair, looking suddenly older. It started small. Online poker. I thought I could handle it. And the threats? He stared at his hands. I made them up. Sent texts to myself from burner phones. Showed them to Daniel. Daniel made a choked sound. The money? I pressed. Gone. All of it. The casinos, the online sites. Robert's voice cracked. I kept thinking one big win would fix everything. I pushed the envelope toward him. Take it. Both brothers stared at me. What? Robert reached for the envelope. Take it, I repeated. But first, say it again. About the fake threats, the lies, all of it. Clearly for the recording. Robert grabbed the envelope, words tumbling out. He confessed everything: the manipulation, the fake threats, the deliberate targeting of Daniel's protective instincts. Each word seemed to age Daniel by years. When Robert finished, I nodded to Maurice at the bar. He approached, placing a hand on Robert's shoulder. "Robert Clayton?" Maurice's voice shifted to its courtroom tone. "I'm serving you with papers for criminal fraud, attempted extortion, and violation of restraining orders. The police are waiting outside." "What?" Robert tried to stand, but Morris's grip tightened. "The check's fake," I said quietly, "but your confession is very, very real." Two plainclothes officers appeared, quietly escorting a shell-shocked Robert out. The few other patrons barely noticed. "You planned this," Daniel said, his voice hollow. "All of it." "Yes." I gathered my things. Because sometimes the only way to help someone is to let them face consequences. "He's my brother. And I'm your wife. The wife you betrayed for a lie." I stood up. "I'll be staying at Lily's again tonight. You have some thinking to do about trust, Daniel. About family. About what matters more. Enabling Robert's destruction or saving our marriage." As I walked out, Lily fell into step beside me. "That was intense," she whispered. "It's not over," I replied, watching Daniel through the window, still sitting alone at the table. "The hard part comes tomorrow." "What happens tomorrow?" I pulled out another envelope. The real one this time. Phase 3. And this time, it's Daniel's turn to make a choice. Because sometimes saving a marriage means being willing to risk losing it first. The police station coffee was terrible, but Daniel drank it anyway. We sat in hard plastic chairs, watching through one-way glass as Robert spoke with his court-appointed lawyer. "Bail's set at $50,000, Maurice said, joining us. "Given his history and the new charges?" "I'll pay it," Daniel said automatically. "No," I cut in. "You won't." Daniel turned to me. "We can't just leave him in there. That's exactly what we're going to do." I pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying since last night. "But first, we need to talk about these." Inside were printouts of every unauthorized transfer Daniel had made, every lie he'd told, every moment of betrayal over the past months. And beneath those, divorce papers. "What is this?" His voice cracked. "Your choice." I laid everything on the table between us. "You can bail Robert out. Again. Enable him. Again. Watch him destroy himself while dragging you down with him. Again." I tapped the divorce papers. "Or you can choose us. But you can't have both." "You're making me choose between my brother and my wife?" "No. I'm making you choose between living a lie and living the truth." I stood up. "Robert's getting the help he needs. Real help this time, whether he wants it or not. The question is, what are you going to do?" Daniel stared through the glass at his brother. Robert looked small now, defeated. Nothing like the charismatic manipulator who'd nearly destroyed our lives. "He's family," Daniel whispered. "So am I. Or at least I thought I was." Maurice cleared his throat. "The bail window closes in 20 minutes. You need to decide, Daniel." Daniel reached for the papers with trembling hands, reading through the documented betrayals. Each page seemed to hit him like a physical blow. "I did this," he said finally. "All of it. I chose him over you, over us, over everything we built." "Yes, you did. And now you want me to just abandon him?" "No." I sat back down. "I want you to stop abandoning yourself. Stop abandoning us. Robert needs to face consequences, real ones, not the kind that get smoothed over with family money and excuses." Through the glass, Robert looked up, meeting Daniel's eyes. For a moment, they stared at each other. Two brothers bound by lies and manipulation for so long that truth felt like betrayal. Daniel picked up a pen. "Wait," I said. "Before you sign anything, there's something else you need to see." I pulled out my phone, showing him the email I'd received that morning. "The treatment center has a bed available. 3 months, intensive program, fully paid for. How? I called in some favors, made some arrangements. If Robert completes the program, the prosecutor might consider a lighter sentence. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. You did this? After everything? I did it because leaving him in jail wouldn't solve the real problem, but neither will bailing him out. I took Daniel's hand. He needs help, real help, and so do you. Me? There's a family counseling program for people affected by loved ones' addictions. I've enrolled us both, if you want to go. Daniel looked at the papers again, then at his brother, then at me. All this time, I thought I was protecting him, but I was just hurting everyone, including yourself. I squeezed his hand. So what's it going to be? Daniel picked up the pen again, but instead of reaching for the bail forms, he pulled the divorce papers closer. These, he said, voice steady for the first time in days. Tell me what they say. They say that if you ever lie to me again, if you ever betray our trust like this again, there won't be another chance. They say that our marriage can survive this, but only if we both choose it. Really choose it. He signed, not the divorce papers, but the attached reconciliation agreement. The one that laid out terms for rebuilding trust, including therapy, transparency, and firm boundaries with Robert. Through the glass, Robert watched, realization dawning on his face as no one came to post his bail. For the first time in his life, his actions would have real consequences. What happens now? Daniel asked as we left the station. Now we do the hard work. I linked my arm through his. Together this time. Behind us, Maurice stayed to handle the paperwork that would send Robert to treatment rather than prison. One last act of family love, but one wrapped in steel boundaries instead of enabling weakness. As we walked to the car, Daniel stopped. Thank you, he said, for not giving up on either of us. Don't thank me yet, I replied. The real test starts tomorrow. Because saving a marriage isn't about one dramatic moment. It's about all the small choices that come after. And we had a lot of choices ahead of us. The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee from the treatment center's garden cafe as I waited for Daniel. Through the window, I could see him and Robert in their final family counseling session, their gestures animated but no longer hostile. My phone buzzed, a text from Lily. How's it going? About to find out, I replied. The door chimed and both brothers emerged. Robert looked healthier than I'd seen him in years, clear-eyed, steady on his feet. Daniel's smile reached his eyes again. Camilla. Robert nodded, keeping the respectful distance we'd established during his treatment. Thank you for coming today. How did it go? I'm being discharged tomorrow, he said, moving into the halfway house we discussed. And the job? Started training next week, entry-level accounting clerk. He laughed softly. Ironic, right? The gambling addict handling other people's money. Under strict supervision, Daniel added. Under strict supervision, Robert agreed. Listen, Camilla, what I did to you both? I held up a hand. We've been through this in family therapy. What matters now is what you do going forward. Right. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. Which is why I wanted you to have this. Inside was a promissory note for $40,000, the amount he'd taken through Daniel's deception. It's not much, he admitted. Minimum payments at first, but every penny I can spare goes toward paying you back. Keep it, I said. Put it toward your kids' college funds instead. Robert's eyes widened. But after everything I did? Consider it an investment in your recovery, in your children's future. I glanced at Daniel. In family, real family, not the enabling kind. Robert nodded, blinking back tears. I should go pack. Early discharge tomorrow. After he left, Daniel and I walked through the garden. The same garden where we'd had our first therapy session 3 months ago, both raw with hurt and uncertainty. You're quiet, I said, just thinking about how different things could have been. If you hadn't caught on, if you hadn't fought for us the way you did, if you hadn't chosen to fight too, I added. He stopped by a bench. Our bench where we'd sat during breaks between sessions, slowly rebuilding trust. I have something for you too, he said, pulling out a small box. Inside was a key. What's this? To our new joint account. He sat down. The one with both our names, both our oversight, complete transparency. No more separate accounts, no more hidden transactions. Daniel, I know it's just a symbol, he continued. Trust isn't built on grand gestures. It's built on daily choices, on constant vigilance against old patterns. But I wanted you to have something tangible, something that says, I choose us. Every day, I choose us. I turned the key over in my hands. Speaking of choices, Carol called yesterday. Daniel tensed slightly. And? Robert's supervised visits with the kids are going well. She's considering joint custody again, once he's established in the halfway house. That's good news. It is. I pocketed the key. But what matters is how you're feeling about it. He thought for a moment. Hopeful, but not responsible. Their relationship is their journey, just like Rob's recovery is his journey. And our journey? Daniel took my hand, his grip firm but gentle. Is right here. Together. Equal partners. My phone buzzed again. Maurice this time. Final paperwork filed. All accounts transferred and secured. Ready to go home? I asked Daniel. Actually, he pulled out 2 coffee cups from the cafe. I thought we could sit here a while, talk about that vacation we've been putting off, the one where we don't check our phones or worry about family emergencies. I accepted the coffee, settling onto our bench. The autumn sun warmed my face as Daniel talked about beach plans and hotel bookings, his voice light with a freedom I hadn't heard in years. This was what victory felt like. Not the dramatic confrontation at the bar, not Robert's arrest or rehabilitation, but this quiet moment of genuine peace, of trust rebuilt, stronger than before because we knew its true value. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked. About how sometimes saving something means being willing to lose it first. I sipped my coffee. About how love isn't just about standing by someone, it's about standing up to them when necessary. About how your financial advisor wife is smarter than everyone else? He grinned. That too. I leaned against him. And about how this bench has better coffee than that police station. His laughter carried across the garden. Free, unburdened, real. Just like us. Just like our future.